I am running because Congressman Amodei has voted for some terrible things.
And I know President Trump's been saying how he would like it to go back to the Senate and to Congress, where you guys can pick it over and try to get rid of some of the more aggressive spending things that no one likes, to get rid of that and see if you can push it through again, as it's already signed. How do you feel about that?
Well, in total honesty, let me tell you that the omnibus spent the amount of money that everybody voted for the budget about 2 months before. Now, I'm not saying the White House isn't informed. I'm saying what is reported in the news and on the blogosphere is like, we forgot that a bunch of them voted for it. It wasn't unanimous, but it was with the White House's encouragement. Second thing you need to know about it is that's 30% of funding. So when we talk about the deficit, it's like, guess what? This is discretionary spending. Department of Defense, Department of Agriculture, Veterans Affairs, Homeland Security, all those things. So when you talk about the deficit, 70% of it is driven by what we call mandatory statutory spending. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the debt. That doesn't mean to say we should be given a pass on the 30%. So yeah, it was an absolute value judgment on my part.
The omnibus bill is more than just the spending, but I will address the spending first. Once you pass the bill into law, it's very, very difficult to get it changed. And in fact, it's nearly impossible, as I think that the congressman will agree with me, having served you, you know that once a law is a law, it's more difficult to repeal it than to stop it when it first begins. We have a constitution that allows for enumerated powers for the federal government. And there are many agencies that are being funded right now that are unconstitutional. They should be at the local, state level. And one of those is the Department of Education. The EPA is another one of those kinds of agencies with their programming that need to be defunded. But those kinds of things were actually increased in this omnibus bill. That funding was increased. Now let's go a little deeper into the bill. There are some terrible things within the bill that invade our privacy. When we fund the Department of Education, we also fund their programs like Common Core. Remember that Common Core, one of the basic problems that we have with Common Core is a databasing component that is really spying on our children. Also within the bill is an invasion of privacy with the FISA expansion of the law enforcement's ability to do warrantless searches. Also within that bill is the Fix NICS. We have a violence problem, not a gun problem. The agencies have been incentivized through the omnibus bill, through this Fix NICS piece of the omnibus bill, to turn over their databases to the federal government in order to check those databases for what they might consider to be red flags. And the incentive is, if you don't turn over your database, we're going to withhold your bonuses. So they have an incentive to do this. And now anyone who is in a federal database, that could be a veteran, that could be a senior citizen. So it may not be a direct attack on our ability to keep and bear arms, but what it is a direct attack on those who apply to have a CCW or to buy a firearm. Within that bill, we have more funding for Planned Parenthood. And you can say you're pro-life, but if you're funding the largest provider of abortions, how does that make you pro-life? You know, you can't ride both sides of the fence. And in fact, when we talk about corruption in Washington, D.C., what we're really talking about is, do you say one thing to your constituency and do you do another thing when you're there, hoping that they won't check out the record and find out that you have been complicit with your votes. So I would just say that there's more to this omnibus bill than just the funding, but the funding is awful. It has, as I said in my beginning statement, leveraged your future. I think you're in enough debt. You probably all have some student loans out there, and you can't carry the debt of the nation. And also hope that at some point you'll get some return on the dollars that you're paying into Social Security. There are solutions to what's going on in our country. The solutions are that we need to cut back on the spending. I've showed you a couple of areas where that could be done. We need to pay back on the debt, and that means we need to pay back on those IOUs that are in the Social Security Trust Fund right now, rather than depending on you to pay into the trust fund to support those of us that are on Social Security. That fund needs to be made whole so that our payments are paying for us and your payments then pay for you. And going forward, I think that we should think about how we can individualize your retirement as well as your health care. That also is in the omnibus bill, as well as an amnesty piece in the omnibus bill. It's just a terrible bill. I don't think that we're going to be able to repeal all of it. Some of those pieces are going to be left intact, and we're going to have to live with them again and again and again. So the final piece, after we pay back, cut back, we need to take our country back to the Constitution, as I said, to those enumerated powers, bring government back to the local level where we, the people, have a greater say in what goes on in the decisions that are made. The part of my experience with life, my husband worked for the federal government, and I lived through 3 shutdowns. And I will tell you, at the end of the shutdowns, we always got a paycheck. It always comes back. And they don't shut down essential services. They shut down non-essential. That word non-essential should be a red flag to every American. If it's not essential, why are we funding it in the first place? I don't think it's the worst thing that can happen when we have to adjust how we're doing things in order to balance a budget. We would like to see a balanced budget at the federal level. We have one here at the state level. Our state, unfortunately, thinks the way to balance our budget here is to raise taxes, but at least we have that in place where they have to consider it every time they're in session. Will we balance this budget, or will we just kick the can down the road to the next generation, which is what's been happening. And that's why this is still a terrible vote on a terrible bill.
First of all, here's another fact to keep in mind. The omnibus funded the federal government spending through September 30th of this year. Let me repeat that. The omnibus funded the federal government through September 30th of this year. So the permanence of the funding is through September 30th. If you hate the omnibus, then hate away till September 30th of this year. Sharron's right, 90-some of my colleagues voted against it, and it's their absolute right to. You want to talk about Planned Parenthood funding? Nationwide, there are some issues that Sharron's spot on. Guess what? Nonetheless, the clinic here provides wellness care for women, for about 2,500 women in the Truckee Meadows. We have 18 other clinics which provide a lot more, but here's what we did as part of our homework. Are you providing abortion services at your clinic? No. If somebody goes to that clinic and you want an abortion, then you get referred out. Second of all, the Hyde Amendment was preserved in the omnibus, which says no federal funds for abortions. Healthcare is a pretty big and important issue. I'm going to keep that open as long as they're not breaking the law and providing abortion services with federal funds, and I'm going to keep it open as long as they're not providing abortion services in that clinic. Not a great answer.
We're going to go through this again in September. What does that mean? Does that mean more debt? I think that we need to at some point say, it all stops here, the buck stops here, we're not going to kick the can down the road one more time. We're going to actually deal with the spending, and we're going to find some solutions to these problems. We need to think about what the people have given us, which is the presidency, the Senate, and the House, and they're saying, do something with that, and do something with what we've given you. Make some changes. That's what we want.